And it really works. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, I always tell people, even if you only have just still post consistently at the same times, and like it'll grow. It'll just grow.
Yeah, you and Jesse could geek out on that stuff because I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm to the point.
I'm so into it.
Where I asked my daughter to help me with stuff on my phone, right?
Yeah.
Like I've become that.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes I go the Facebook,
Right.
Instead of saying Facebook, right? I'll be like, hey, log into the Facebook for me,
Yeah.
right? Or like I'm like, oh shit, like
Yep.
it's like that commercial, like, are you becoming your parents?
Yep.
Right?
Not so anonymous with a... No, I can't do it. Not so anonymous with EJ or Rekka.
Yeah.
So we're here today with Bryana R. First of all, Bryana, thank you for opening up your workspace to us and letting us come in. I'm super grateful. You were suggested to me by a friend of mine that we interviewed already, and with high praise, like this gal's got it going on, right? Like she's really doing the thing, and her life is excelling because of recovery. And so I'm super grateful for you to take your time with us and allow us to interview you. So thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
So the first thing I always like to start off by asking is what's your clean date?
My clean date is July 17th, 2017.
2017.
Yep.
So was that almost 6 years now, right?
5 years, 6 months, and some change.
No fronts.
Right, no fronts.
No fronts on that.
No fronts.
And so what does that clean date mean to you? Right?
My clean date means to me basically like that day, right? 7/17/17. All those sevens are just like, it's really special, and it means that I don't want to have to change that. Like, I need that to just be my clean date, right? And that's something I always remember and hold on to, is it means that much to me that I don't ever want to find a reason to have to change that date, you know?
Right.
That's my one and only clean date.
Perfect. I like that. And so like we always like to go back and kind of qualify a little bit, right? Because people that are watching this, whether they're still in their active addiction, they probably look at you and me if they don't know us, and they're like, they're not addicts, right? They don't look like addicts.
Yeah.
They're cleaned up.
Yeah.
They got a clean shirt on, right? They don't look sucked up. So like what did and we'll go even further back. Like, what did life look like for you growing up?
So growing up, my mom actually had me when she got pregnant with me when she was 15. So, you know, my grandparents actually raised me until I was 7. You know, my mom was also a recovering addict. So she, during that time, was using, and my grandparents were taking care of me. So I kind of always went through life growing up, like, just wanting the validation. You know, even when she got me back, I still didn't know, like, how to work on myself being that little girl. So I just went through, you know, the rest of my teenage to adult years, never healing that little girl.
Right. And probably a lot of thoughts like, why does my family dynamic look different? Right. And it's funny because like in recovery, we get to learn about ourselves. Right. And now, like, I know you're a parent and I'm a parent. Yes. Right. And I had my kids later on in life, you know, and you only understand what that looks like when you have kids. Like, I couldn't imagine having a kid at 15. Right. And so
exactly. So now being the age I am, looking back, my mom was just a kid herself. And then the man she had me with, you know, I've never had a relationship with him, because when you have kids so young, you know, he was in and out of jail. So he wasn't really probably able to be a dad, you know, to me. But, you know, I don't know if he had a chance to reach out, find out who his kids were. Because my mom ended up having my little sister when I was 3. I had a little sister and the same dad, same problems though. Same thing with my sister. You know, we just grew up. That's just how we grew up, you know. And I went through, you know, those early years. I noticed in middle school, you know, I got a little boy crazy, because it was nice getting some validation, right? From especially the opposite sex. I like boys. And I ended up getting with somebody at 15 and then getting pregnant at 17.
This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sorensen's Ace Hardware, located at 402 Washington Avenue in Los Banos. Proudly serving the community since 1947. Please check out our friend at Sorensen's for all your hardware needs. Come on, guys, support those who support us. Thanks, Sorensen's. So repeating that cycle.
Right. I waited had a couple years on mom, but still I was still a child having a baby, you know?
Right. And probably something and that's like the cycle of insanity we talk about breaking around here, right? It is, you know, we grow up like, and I had the same experience. Like my mom was a smoker and different things, right? Like there was drugs. Oh, I'm never going to be like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I always, in high school, teenage years, I remember telling my mom, I'll never be like you. I'll never be an addict like you. Right. And then, you know, and then life happens.
And
you end up like those, like who you judge, right? Is I feel like who I ended up like is who I was judging.
Yeah. And I never appreciated my parents until I had kids. Right. And from just hearing the little bit of your story, like, the best your mom knew how to do was give you to your grandparents when you had a chance, right?
Yeah.
So like, in getting into like staying in those early years, so did that become a coping mechanism for all those feelings that you were dealing with?
Well, yeah, it's weird. I never smoked weed until I was 18 years old. I remember I had already had my daughter. I was about 18, 19. That was the first time I ever tried weed, right? The first time I got drunk was maybe 15, and I noticed I liked that feeling. I liked that thrill and that escape, right, that it gave me. So I would, you know, casually go out like on the weekends. It wasn't an all the time thing, but you know, when there was like teenage parties, high school parties, I would go. But when I would drink, I noticed I would drink a little bit more than everybody else. You know what I mean?
Right.
in those beginning first few times, I already knew, like, you know what, I probably drink. I outdrink everyone, you know, and I black out. I would drink to black out and have a good time.
Yeah, and that's what and it's funny because some people will like go. I understand like me, like when I used there was things I was covering up, but like a lot of times I just like to get high, right? And I still like if I had the choice, I love to get high.
Yeah,
I just am smart enough to know where it takes me today, right?
Right.
And I think that's the misconception about people in recovery is like we don't get it. No, I get it, right? Yeah. And so like I know we talked a little bit on the phone before this, and you don't like to go too much into the mess, but like where does that path take you? You know, because you don't have to use for a long period of time for life to get pretty unmanageable, right?
Right.
So you had a kid real young, and then you were introduced to alcohol and then to weed.
Well, yeah, I had that little girl real young, and then me and her father, we got married. I was only 19 when I married him. You know, I was or 19 or 20, maybe 20. But we were so young, fresh out of high school, being married, you know, in that relationship, it was already toxic. You know what I mean? That was my first toxic relationship because like he was actually like another first high for me. You know what I mean? That chase, you know, because we were off and on all the time. So I would, you know, chase him a lot of the years that we were together. And when we ended up getting married, it was okay at first. And then I noticed when things started kind of like, I noticed this wasn't going to work out. I started drinking more, right? So when me and him were ending our relationship, drinking more led to me starting to try cocaine. You know, when I tried cocaine, it was like, wow, like where's this been? Like this, it gave me that feeling too, like of that thrill you get when you first start falling in love with someone. Yeah. That was the feeling that cocaine gave me when I was introduced to that. And I liked it. I loved it a lot. You know? And
so like we always talk about the disease is progressive, right?
Exactly.
So then it starts, and then like I know for me, like when I was taught about drugs, they were all lumped together. Yeah. And every single one I tried that progressed felt better and better.
Right.
So I get it.
Yeah.
So then you started dabbling in this and that. How long did it take from the point that you started for things to really?
It only took me about 2.5 years after I first started dabbling in cocaine. I started partying and doing things that I would never do, things I would never do. And, it took me all the way down to where I was homeless and only had like a small bag of clothes to my name. That was all I had. And yeah, it only took me a little over a couple years to get there. And I remember I knew I had a problem because at the end of that road, I had tried meth, a couple times. And I was like, dang, this is crazy. I always told myself, like, what am I doing? I would never try these things, So when I did try those, I knew like, okay, it doesn't matter how scared I am. I need to just make the change now, now that I'm homeless, don't have my kids. It's time for me to make some changes.
Right. And for a lot of people, the fact of those things compiled on top of each other. Now I'm homeless. Now I don't have my kids. A lot of people just lose hope right there and say it's never going to get better.
Right.
So I mean, like for you, like what was that spark, you know, of like, I got to try something different. Like was recovery in your life at all at that point, or?
Well, you know, my grandpa that I talked about, my grandparents that raised us, my grandpa actually, he was in recovery. So I always knew there was somewhere to go, right? But it never really clicked with me that like I would need the help, you know, one day. So when I did need the help, it was like I had to, like, I was so defeated that it was just kind of like, man, life cannot get any worse than this, right? So I was like, let me just tell my parents and see what they say, you know? But I remember going to my mom and telling her, like, I wanted to change my life. And she gave me, like, this number. And she's like, if you're sincere, you know, you'll call. And I remember I was like, dang, you know, my mom, she can't just like help me and like hold my hand and walk me through this. So sorry guys.
No, you're good.
At least we're
you're
getting
good.
them out the way now because I always get a little emotional at some point, and I'm already dramatic now. But you know, I took the number, right? I called the places, right? And I think I called some places out here in Stockton, right? But my mom just let me like call these numbers, I guess, for no reason, because she ended up giving me another lady's number. And she's like, okay, well, you know what? You've already tried those. I'm going to take you somewhere. I'm going to drop you off in the Bay Area. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go to the Bay. That's probably better than getting clean than where I did most of my running, which was Stockton.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I ended up getting my little stuff together that I had. And then she took me down to Fremont, like Newark, and introduced me to this, well, it was one of her friends. I already knew who it was, but I didn't know she was going to be the lady helping me, you know? So, so she took me to her house, and it was all dramatic. I'm leaving my mom, right? But I hadn't even, like, really seen my family like that because I was always on, you know, just running the streets anyways. But I ended up getting with this lady, and she put me in this recovery shelter in the Bay Area. And I remember it was like, I told myself too, like, okay, you know what? I'm going to just like get my shit together in 30 days. Right. Because I still at this time didn't think I had a problem. Right. I just thought that, you know, I can learn how to use and drink alcohol successfully. Right. I was like, all I need is 30 days. Right. I'm just going to clean up real quick. And, you know, I noticed after the 30 days, like, there was still problems. You know, I still didn't have my kids, right, because I gave them willingly to their dad. That with that last year of me using, there was some point they were with me at my grandma's house, but I ended up having to just give them to their dad because I didn't really want to drag them through all my mess. Right. You know, I was like, I think it's a good idea, you know, to just let them go with their dad. And I ended up staying there at that shelter place for like 11 months. Yeah, while I was there. It was like a recovery shelter. So you had to be clean, and you had a bed, and it was really nice. It was really nice experience because the people who ran that place, they did a really good job.
Yeah, and that's like I can relate because, you know, when I left the treatment, Barney was only 6 months, but my daughter was about to turn 1. She was about to have a surgery, right? I had another one that was 7.
Yeah.
Right, and from my significant other, my wife, right, it was like, how can you be so selfish and leave, right? And the people in the rooms were urging me on because I was in the rooms at this point. My family didn't want me to go.
Yeah.
You know, and what I had to explain to them is like, in order for me to get right, the people that are clean are telling me,
yeah,
I need to change and something dramatic, right?
So,
and
yes.
The way that I was told was, you know, you're going to miss her first birthday, but if you get this thing right, you have an opportunity to never miss a birthday again. Right. Right.
Because like my son was starting kindergarten, and I think my daughter was like maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade. And, you know, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be there for my son's first day of kindergarten. But my mom was like, it's okay because you'll be there like later.
Right.
So I was like, all right. And I listened to my mom. I was like, all right, fine. I'll let the custody stuff go for now, you know, because I was like, I'll just get better. and you know, after like 6 months clean, I ended up being able to take my ex back to court.
Yeah. And that's like, you know, and so you talked about, you know, the form of help your mom was giving you at the time, which seemed cold.
Right.
Right. But
Right.
her being in recovery and now you being a further along down the road in recovery, does it make sense to you now?
Right. And that term, like I talk about it in our literature, you know, the baby that you can't baby the addict.
Yeah.
Right. Like if anybody has family.
Sorensen's also has a Modesto location located at 1433 Coffee Road. Modesto, true value for all your hardware needs. For all of our people out in the Modesto area, please support those who support us. Thank you.
Members out there and they're using and they're, you know, and they're an addict, like you can't baby them, you can't help them, you know, and it's not, you know, before I used to look at it like, hey man, you know, F my parents, you know,
Right.
they should be helping me, you know, they should be helping me live this lifestyle that I'm living, you know, but I look back and it's like that saved my life.
Right. Because you can't carry the message, but you can carry the addict, right?
Right.
And to furthermore on that, like, I mean, whenever anybody reaches out to me, as far as like my family member, I said, the only thing you could do is take everything you give them away.
Right.
You know? And so like after, you know, 11 months in that shelter and you're progressing, you know, with your kids, trying to get custody back, what's the next phase moving from the shelter? Like, what do you do after that?
Well, you know what what it did was you had to save money to be there, right? Like that was one of the requirements there. So I actually saved a cool amount of money up, and I was able to, when I had got like an exit date, gave them an exit date that I was leaving. I saved up enough to get my own 1-bedroom apartment.
Right.
So, you know, and I was able to furnish it because they taught me how to save.
Right.
You know, I had to learn all like the basic life skills over again because I like, you know, messed up so much to where I just didn't even know how to live anymore normally. You know what I mean? My life was so unmanageable. I wasn't able to do that until I got there and I started, you know, doing some work.
Right. And because the conditions that you were living in before, you touched on being homeless and all that stuff becomes normal to a person, right?
Right.
Like when you're living, it's amazing as human beings what we can adapt to and say, oh, I guess this is my new normal.
Right.
So you had to relive all those skills over again.
Yes.
Right.
And my life, you know, really, it's always been a little unmanageable. Even in, you know, right after I moved out of my parents' house at 17, you know, and I didn't even know how to do that. And they didn't even kick me out. I just thought I knew it all.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I dipped. And then I had to figure it out all on my own.
You had a good case of the I knows, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, and I had those coming into recovery, right?
Yeah.
And like my sponsor would tell me, she's like, everything you know can get us all loaded, right? Like, you know, I got like the tough love version of a lot of this stuff. A little softer, I think, than his sponsor gave him. But so like, and you also talked about, you know, like your recovery goes back 3 generations, right? You have parents in recovery and your grandparents.
Yes.
So what does that look like? Were you introduced to the rooms of recovery before you ever had a problem?
Yes.
Like, were you the kid that was hanging around?
I was the kid that was hanging around and playing with the other kids at the meetings.
Right. And so and then again in that transitional living, was that when you were reintroduced to the recovery, the 12-step recovery process?
Yes. And it was a whole, I never really knew as a little girl what you know, I would just be like, this is just something that everybody does. A lot of people do in my family. You know, I even have an uncle who's a pastor, and he got clean too, but he chose like the church route, and he's a pastor today in San Jose. So, you know, I grew up with a lot of family members who were just changing their life, you know, at least this part of the family, right? And they would stay away from the other parts of the family that was still, you know, living a certain way. So I always grew up knowing that there was something wrong, right? There was something wrong and people were changing, but I never really knew it until I experienced it.
Well, in the crazy delusion that we could tell us, right? Tell ourselves, like, not me, I'm unique.
Right.
Right? Like, it's like, it may be good for these people, right? But I don't got a problem until it's. So, like, what does it look like for you when you're going into the rooms for yourself, right? Like, because I imagine that's way different than just being around. Did you walk in thinking like, oh, this is my opportunity, I got it now? Are we resistant to the process?
A little bit resistant, because I just felt like, you know what, I just went through something traumatic. Like I got a divorce, you know, and, you know, I had a kid young. I don't think I really have a problem, you know, but I remember being at this meeting and this lady checked in. She wasn't even the main speaker, but she checked in. And when she did, I remember like really relating to her because her parents were also in recovery. And I was like, man, wait a minute, and I remember I'm just crying, she's just checking in, and I'm like, I got all these tears. I was so emotional, and I asked her to sponsor me.
Right.
And she that was when it changed for me too, because that was one of the first meetings I went to early on. And that's when I knew too, like, you know what, maybe I do belong here because I'm relating to all these people around me, and that lady is still my sponsor today.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point forward, like, how do things start changing for you? Right. Like, I mean,
Yes.
I'm imagining in some pretty big ways, because I mean, we're sitting in your studio, right? This is like your business,
Yeah.
a productive member of society.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking from, from homeless to shelter. Like, what does that process look like for you? Do things start coming back slowly for you? Was it a quick process?
I felt like, just doing the footwork and showing up is just a big part of it. When you do the footwork and you show up and you have you start applying some spiritual principles to the areas of your life that need it, which is most, things just start happening without even like a plan. I didn't have a plan for any of this.
Right.
It just kind of just started. God just kind of, I feel like he just planned, he's behind the scenes planning my life for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and then I got to imagine you had some relationships to work on.
Right.
When you started getting clean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that look like? I mean, first off with like your grandparents, your parents, but like your kids.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how did that work for you?
Well, with my kids, I'm very honest with them. They know that I have a problem with drugs and alcohol. With my ex-husband, that's the relationship I've worked on. My mom and dad, I was telling him earlier, I have a key to my parents' house today. You know what I mean? Because they love and trust me. My grandpa, he passed away when I was 11. And my grandma passed away when I had a year clean. So it was actually really cool too, because when I passed away, she found my grandpa's 1-year medallion from the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And she had passed away, and she had told me that she had it right before she passed away. So I'm like, dang, and we're getting ready to clean out my grandma's house because she was no longer with us. And I remember like, dang, man, where would grandma have put it with all this? There's boxes and boxes of papers, and I remember finding it behind her little rocking seat in a little like those cookie tin can things. It was in there.
She's probably saving it for you.
Yeah. It was like, I was like, dang, man, where is it? And I remember finding it, and I was like, cool. So I still have that.
Oh, that's awesome.
And my grandma was really happy when I got clean.
Yeah, I got to imagine like that's got to be a huge thing for you that she was.
Right. I was able to make that amends to her.
Yeah.
Because at the end of my running, that was the last place I lived, was with my grandma.
Yeah. And then so like now, like raising kids in recovery, right? And trying to break some of these cycles, right, that we talk about.
Yeah.
Like, what does that process look like for you, like raising kids?
It's actually scary because I always I look at my kids, I'm like, dang, I don't ever want them to have to go through this. But that's like another reason why I'm really honest with them about who I am, because I want them to always know like they can come to me.
Yeah.
If I'm not going to baby them or help them, of course, if they do end up taking certain routes that I did. But I just want them to be comfortable so they can always tell me things, because it's pretty scary, especially I don't think fentanyl was that big back then when I was out there, and it's a big deal, and you got kids, dying from it today. So it's I try to let them know, don't take pills from anybody. You guys don't know. If you start drinking in high school, you always call me to pick you up. You never get in the car with somebody drinking, because I know I'm powerless, and I know kids are going to be kids and teenagers are going to be teenagers. My daughter's about to be 14. My son, he just turned 11. So it's like, we're getting to those years where, my daughter, she's going to be in high school, and she's going to be starting to turn into her own little adult self, So,
oh, yeah.
And with their dad, me and him, we hated each other. We hated each other so bad. It was like beef, like I would say like Bloods and Crips, me and him, we couldn't stand each other. And now me and him and I, we do really well co-parenting our kids now today. So
you're setting that example by how you live. Right. And I could relate, like talking about, like I have a 14-year-old daughter, and it's scary right now with this fentanyl epidemic.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be an addict to die from drugs anymore, right?
No, you could just be having fun with your friends and just experimenting.
Yeah, and that's like the scary part. And you know what, like, and what I'll tell you is from my experience, what you're doing is working, right? Mm-hmm. Because that 14-year-old daughter I have, like we have the one thing that we nourish the most is
Yeah.
our open line of communication, right? And we
Yeah.
got that call. She was at a quinceañera,
Mm-hmm.
and she called us because her friend was so drunk and she thought some boys were going to take advantage of
Oh,
her.
man, yeah.
And she reached out and called me and my wife, and we were able to go pick them up.
Yeah.
And like, for me, that was huge.
Yeah.
Do I condone the behavior? No.
Right.
But you got to take the win, right?
Yes, you got to be like, you know what, I'm just going to go get her because we don't want nothing to happen to our kids at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah, that's the most important resource we have, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's it worth if we can't pass this to them, right? These
Right.
spiritual principles and these things we're learning.
Yeah.
Because I know other people that are like hard line and recovery, like, oh, if they're using it, I'm going to kick them out of my house, or you know,
Yeah.
live that. Let me
Yeah.
know how that works out for you.
When they're kids, yeah, that's, I'd have to experience that to see, like, what I would do in that situation. Because it's easy to say, oh, I would just kick them out, you
Yeah.
know, but until you're in that situation, you don't know what you'll do, you know?
Yeah, and so, like, what does life look like for you today? Like, I mean, is recovery still your first priority, or
Yes. I try to, remind myself, where I came from.
Right.
I always got to remember God always finds a way to keep me humbled, through the pandemic, it got a little challenging, it got a little challenging for me to where I kind of backed off a little bit because we were all kind of stuck at home, and it got a little comfortable, I'm like, dang, I could just stay home all the time. I don't have to even go anywhere. Like, the work could be just done, right? No, but then you got to start going back into the world, going back to work, dealing with your job and other people. And it's like, but the pandemic definitely made me feel, but I know I'm not the only person that felt like that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people were feeling that way. It was kind of like, I don't like change. When I get set into a certain way of how my recovery should look to me, and stuff starts changing, I get a little discouraged, a little sad. So me, I was struggling through that pandemic stuff.
Yeah, and like the reading yesterday that I read every day was, that I can't, we can.
Right.
Right. And I get caught up like you do. I'm like, I could do this by myself. Like, I did a couple cool things during the pandemic. I found another fellowship to belong to that was like a martial arts kind of thing. And then I started telling myself I could do this.
Right. I did that too, but with the gym.
Right.
I was like I had lost a bunch of weight and I just thought, what, I'm going to meal prep. I got my fellowship right here, and it's a positive thing. You know what I mean? But it's like what got me here was working on myself, the 12 steps, and I need to be a part of that, and I need to give back to the newcomer, so that's like why I think recovery is still first for me.
Yeah, because we're masters of substitution, right?
Yeah.
We did it in our addiction.
Yeah.
I don't got a problem with this. I just do this now.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that I find, it's funny because I was sharing last night in a meeting. I was talking about, what was I talking about? I just drew a blank. I was talking about me, like, early in recovery, right? Like my first few years, I was involved in these book studies, some hardcore literature studies, and they would always talk about, like, if I do this, I'm staying clean forever, right? Mm-hmm. And lately there's been certain points in my life where forever seems like a daunting task, right? But what I've come to the revelation, the longer I stay clean, the more that just for today makes sense to me.
Exactly, yes.
Like, can you elaborate on that? Like, do you have the same focus, or is it like, do you're staying clean for forever, or sometimes is it like a minute at a time, day?
Sometimes, honestly, sometimes it's a day at a time, because I try not to future trip no more, but I know staying clean is something I want to do forever. I do get tempted,
Right.
what I mean? Sometimes I'm like, dang, sometimes I think I feel a little normal where maybe I can just go have a drink, to socialize, with clients or whoever. But I try to play it through like, man, but I really, what would I want to drink for? If I need to feel a buzz, right? Then I'm going to need more than one drink. And then I might just start having too much fun. And I'm honestly scared to take that route again.
Right.
I'd rather just stay completely abstinent, because I don't really feel like I need to change the way I feel right, like today. You know what I mean? And so I just, just try to stick by that and to remind myself, where it took me before. you know. And I know some people, they stop drinking, right, and then they go back out and they're able to, like, you know, socialize, but I don't know what their life looks like behind closed doors, right, or like a spiritual thing, you know what I mean? I don't want to wake up hungover. I don't want to wake up like feeling like, oh man, I text that person this, oh, I said that, oh, I did that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to ever have to feel like that. I like waking up with just a clean conscience every day, and I'm in control of my actions, you know what I mean? I don't have to worry about no liquor courage making me do something crazy, you know, or any kind of courage, you know. So it's like, yeah, I'd rather just, you know, stay to where I'm at, even and like letting the cravings pass, right, because they do pass.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know, and it's funny because like a lot of times I'll say like, oh, I'm never going to use again. But every now and again, it sounds appealing, right? It doesn't have to be like it's funny. I dealt with some death in the family. I never thought about using, right? But like last year, we took the kids to Hawaii, right? What a blessing. And we're sitting there watching the sunset, and I'm thinking about getting high, right? And then my disease is talking and says, nobody would know.
Right. You're on vacation. Yeah.
Nobody would know, right? And then I have to play the tape out, right? Like, oh, I did this before, right? I was clean for a matter of time, and then I decided to just smoke a little weed, right? And it took me deeper than I'd ever been before, you know? And so, I mean, is that like a process for you too? Do you like start playing that tape out?
And you know what? I don't ever want to feel like how I felt. The desperation. I was so desperate when I first got clean, you know. I was so desperate to just change. And it took so much courage to get clean, right? And to check yourself into, everybody there was court ordered. I was the only one there willingly, you know what I mean? Exactly. Yeah. So you can relate, you know, and it's everybody's looking at you like, dang, you're not court ordered to be here, you know? And it's like, I don't ever want to have to get that. I don't ever want to have to go through that again. You know what I mean? Because I might not have the courage next time to do it.
Right.
You know, and I don't want to have to even play with that. And I worked too hard. I've worked too hard to build, you know, what I have in my life, in the relationships with everyone around me. You know, I couldn't even imagine. It would be really devastating.
Yeah, because I mean, at this point, you know, like, and sometimes like your recovery is a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you don't know how many people you're affecting in a positive way by just staying clean, and how many people that you would actually hurt. You know,
exactly. And now I have clients, they know I'm in recovery, you know, and I share my story with a lot of them. And, you know, because I'm not really like, and I know there's some people who are out there. I have a lot of friends who can go out and have that, like a normal socialized drink, right? So I don't even, like, I always tell them too, I don't look at them differently just because they drink, or, you know, they have fun, you know, and do what they do. It's just, this is just for me. Right. I know my limits. I know myself to where I don't even want to play with none of that.
Right. And so like you've lived some pretty crazy experiences. So like, what would you like tell somebody that may be out there and they may be like homeless right now? They may be thinking it's never going to get better. Right. Like, what would you tell somebody? Because you've lived that experience.
Man, what I would tell somebody is that there is hope, you know, on the other side. And like, to be homeless, I feel like it's a choice, right? Because you can always do something. As long as you're breathing, as long as you're doing something, you can always do something to change where you're at, right? Wherever we're at in life, I feel like it's a choice, you know, and it might be hard, but it's doable. You know, if you're alive, it's doable.
Yeah, and that's like, and it's funny, like going back to what you said when you went to the shelter, most of the people were court ordered. Yeah. Like, because I went to treatment right down the street over here at the Salvation Army in Stockton, right? Yeah. And there was like 3 walk-ins in there, and I was one of them. Okay. You know, and they would constantly tell me, like, why are you here? Exactly. Right? And I had to be so singular focused to stay there. You know, and they'd be like, I got 3 years hanging over your head. What do you have? And I got to the point where I'd tell them, I understood what this disease was, right? Like, I have my whole fucking life hanging over my head, right? You may have 3 years. I have a death sentence. Yeah. Because I knew where I was at when I came in. Right. You know, and I think that was the benefit of being in the rooms before I went to treatment. Yeah. You know, I had people telling me, like my sponsor, he's like, dude, you're gonna fucking die. Yeah. Right. And that's how real it was for me. There was a choice. It was either stay out here and bleed until you die, or go get some fucking help.
Right.
Right. And I think for a lot of people, we're looking for the kinder, softer, gentler way.
Yeah.
When there is no kinder, softer, gentler way.
The guy that ran that place too at that time, he was a little mean. He was hard on everybody, and he didn't really talk, you know. But I noticed at the end of my stay there, he was actually really friendly.
Right.
You know what I mean? But in the beginning, he was a little harder on everybody. You know what I mean? So I had to like not really work my way, but kind of just not really prove myself either. I just was there doing everything for me, like you were saying. You know, it's a life and death. Like I could stay out there and die, or you know, and not be a mom. You know, my kids could grow up without me, or I could change, and my kids could grow up with their mom, and I can you know, live a life.
Right.
You know.
So like now, like the shift of perspective. Like, what's your relationship look like with your mom today, right? Because she wasn't there at the beginning.
Right.
And then when you did reach out for help, she gave you the help you needed, not the help you wanted, right?
Exactly.
So, like, I got to imagine there's some stuff you had to work on. Like, what does that relationship look like today?
You know, a lot of people, like, you know, because we go to the gym together. We hang out all the time. We talk. I call my mom probably twice a day, right? And so a lot of people are like, man, I wish I had what you have with your mom, with my mom, right? And I tell them, like, it wasn't always like this. You know what I mean? You shouldn't really judge, you know, anybody's relationship because you don't know what they had to go through to get to this relationship, you know? And, you know, we have a beautiful relationship today. You know, when my mom got me back when I was about in second grade, she was in recovery and she was trying her best. She wasn't always the best mom to me, you know, but as she got more clean time in recovery, she became a better and better mom. And she, you know, we have a beautiful relationship today, you know, and she celebrated 20 years last year and I celebrated 5 years, and I got clean like a week and a half before her clean date. So we have our parties together.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So we get to celebrate recovery together, and, you know, breaking these generational curses is, you know, that get put on, you know, I think that addiction is it could be hereditary. Yeah. You know, especially because nobody really ever used around me when I was growing up. Nobody in my family, at least. And I never really seen it, but it was the feeling thing for me, you know, the feelings.
Well, it's funny because I go back and forth on this, right? Like, was I born an addict?
Right, yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, it really doesn't matter because it matters what you're doing today. Exactly. But at the same time, like, I'm starting to think, I'm like, or is it just the trauma, right? Is it the trauma that generational drug use?
Well, yeah, and like you were saying, everything has a ripple effect. Right. So my mom was using, and I had to live with my grandparents, and it affected me, right? So her using had like an influence on how my life was going to start. Right. So.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're a kid, and you're left by the most important person in your life, and you don't know why.
And you know what's crazy too? I love my mom so much that when I first got clean, I didn't even look at that part of my life. I just started from like, okay, I just started with the relationship that didn't work out. You know, my two older kids, their dad. And I just thought, okay, my problem came from that, right? From that toxic. But when I started doing some writing, right, I was like, dang, actually, you know what? It started when I was a little girl.
Right. And then and for me, like, my trauma wasn't so deep, like, as far as like with parents and stuff. I had a nuclear family and everything else. For me, it was little things not addressed at the time that just snowballed and became these weird behaviors, right? Yeah. Like, I would do shit that I knew was wrong. Yeah. Like, I had morals. I was raised with morals. Yeah. I had grandparents in my life that would teach me these generational lessons. And it got so bad that I was doing stuff that I knew was wrong. Yeah. And I knew it was going to hurt people. And I just couldn't stop. Yeah. You know, and that was the most painful thing, I think, that kept me using for the longest time. Oh, yeah. You know, it is just like I just couldn't make a fucking right decision.
Yeah, because I remember too when my two older kids, their dad, you know, I remember the look in his eyes too with some of the decisions I was making, and it would just make me want to just use more, to just not even like, to just kind of, I had no feelings. Right. I felt like, okay, the more I get loaded and I just, keep at this, right? Make sure I just drink every day and do whatever I do every day to just become numb, right? And that's what it became. I had to be numb so I wouldn't, so I wouldn't realize the bad choices I was making, because I could tell I was letting everybody down.
Yeah, and I have a guy in my sponsorship family. Like, I don't know if he's the one that coined the first thought wrong, but he sure ran with it, right? So,
Okay.
but like for me, that's how it was when I got clean. Like, it took a while to trust myself in the car by myself. That I'm not gonna fuck up. Like, how long did it take you along the process to start like trusting yourself? Like, I'm capable of making good decisions.
Yeah, like when I tell you, when I went to that, when I checked myself into that place, man, I gave my phone to my mom because like I didn't even trust myself. Like, I was like, I'm gonna hit up my old friends, my old connects, and I'm gonna just ruin it.
Right.
So I just gave her my phone, and even people there, they're like, dang, you don't even have a phone? And I was like, no, I'm here to just focus on some shit, okay? Like, don't even talk to me. I need to get some things in line. So like, yeah, I didn't get a phone until maybe I had like 2 months clean, because I wanted to start applying for like work and stuff, and I noticed, okay, I need a phone now. So I started, trusting myself with like having a phone, paying it to not getting old people's numbers, you know what I mean? Just knew my new friends that I was making along the way. And so that was like the only thing I think that at that time I didn't have a car. We were able to walk to where we had to go when I was there, so I would just walk. I did a lot of walking.
No, I get it, because this building we're in right now, I can't tell you how many times I walked by this building when I was in treatment, and like, what's going on up there? Like, like,
I never knew what this building was either. I was telling him too, I never knew what this building was until last year. I was looking for somewhere to teach a braid class. And I was just online, and I remember seeing pictures of it in here, and I'm like, this looks like a scam. I was like, this looks like a freaking scam. But when I ended up meeting with one of the guys that runs the building, he showed me the room I wanted to use for my class, and I was like, dang, it's heckin' nice in here. Like, this isn't a scam. I never knew that Stockton is, it is nice. It's because I used to be like, oh, Stockton sucks. Stockton is so dead. There's nothing good in Stockton, and after like being here and actually changing my perspective about it, I'm like, what? It's actually really nice here. There's a lot of good things happening in Stockton.
Yeah, maybe it's what you were seeking out at that time, right?
Exactly.
And so that's what you do now for a living. You braid hair. Mm-hmm. Was this like a new thing you picked up when you got clean, or was it a skill that you had before?
Well, you know what? I learned how to braid when I was 10 years old. I have 2 sisters who are half Black, and they would always one of them would always want her hair braided. And so she would have me help her braid her hair. Then we would braid all of our Barbies. And that's what we did. So then I started like braiding family members' hair like through middle school and high school, just family members though. And then when I got with my high school sweetheart, I kind of stopped doing that. And then I had my own daughter, and she is half Black. So I realized I need to start braiding, I would braid her hair, and then friends would ask me if I could braid their kids' hair, and I would just do it on the side for a long time. And then when I was out there getting loaded, like that was my job. I would just braid people's hair and make some money, make what I needed to make to get what I needed. And then same thing, I took it with me to when I checked myself into the shelter. I was braiding people's hair there. And then I kind of stopped braiding when I left the shelter, because I got a job as a medical assistant. And so my schedule was a little bit more busier, so I wasn't really doing it as much until my ex got me for, he had already got me for child support. But I noticed when I had to leave the shelter though and get that apartment, I was like, man, I'm gonna have to like get another job. And I was like, you know what? No, I'll just braid people's hair when I get off of work. I'll just have them come to my house and I'll just braid their hair. And so that was so him getting me for child support, as pissed off as I was at him, it actually gave me, like, it was actually God setting up my life, how it was going to be, because I braiding hair on the side, I was able to build up such a big clientele to where I could just quit my job and do it full time, and then like to be at this place, right? You're talking about this building. I would, the courthouse is like right across the street. If like you look out the windows, and that's the courthouse that I would go to every 6 months for the first 3 years of my recovery. I would go there every 6 months to fight for my kids, and like God gave me a view, and I get to look at it every day.
That's awesome.
So it reminds me of like every day. I feel like it's God reminding me like to remember where I came from.
Right. And that's again like why our clean dates are so important to us.
Exactly.
Because if we forget where we came from, we're bound to go right back.
Exactly. So it's more like on a spiritual thing, right? Because normal people, I don't feel like they get it, right? I don't feel like they understand like but it's like the little signs like that. It's also too God reminding me like I brought you back.
Right.
Full circle, brought you back to where I could kind of reflect and be like, man, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that shit no more.
Right.
So yeah, it reminds me. I don't ever want to have to fight for my kids again.
You get that God shot every day.
Yes. Every day when I open up my blinds, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't ever want to have to fight for, to be a mom. I don't want to have to fight for that. And, him and I, we've been doing really good. We when the COVID started, we were able to start co-parenting, and like we made it officially 50-50 in January 2021. And I got to be taken off of child support.
Right.
So I've been a free woman on that child support for a minute now. So yeah, and that's something I don't want to have to go back to. I don't want the government being able to take money out of my check. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and thank God for recovery, right? Because we learn skills to forgive, move on, and mend those relationships, right? Which again is for the kids.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And today, it's like him and his wife too. They, they trust me today.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, they can rely on me. We can rely on each other when it comes to the kids. And we got a co-parent, we get to work together as a team for them.
Well, I think that's what's funny about like people in recovery. When you're doing stuff with normies and they tell you, oh, we're going to do this at a certain time. I'm usually like 5 minutes early.
I want to be.
Right?
Yeah, it's like, well, where is he at? Because like we need to get this thing going, Because I'm pretty punctual with time now. And it's funny because my son actually made a comment to me too, and he's like, yeah, Mom. He's like, no, my dad wasn't worried because he's like, yeah, your mom's never late.
Right.
And I was like, wait, your dad said that about me? I was like, that's really nice.
So like, what is that, like that kind of stuff? Like, what does that mean to you?
It means a lot because there was times I wouldn't show up for my kids.
Right.
Nobody could depend on me. Nobody knew where I was at. So for him to say something like that, it meant a lot to me, not necessarily like who said it, but what, where it came from, because it shows that the work I've been doing on myself, it shows, and it's having that ripple effect.
Well, it's undeniable, right? Because you keep doing it time and time again. You keep showing up.
Right.
And so like, do you ever like look, because I know like we're about the same place in recovery as far as time, right? We think, oh man, there's so many people that got so much time.
Yeah.
But do you ever look back and like give yourself credit for what you've done?
Yeah, I kind of look back and give myself credit. Sometimes I try to stay humble with it though, because I know that a lot of members have helped me along the way.
Right.
The single fathers I've met in the rooms, they've taught me how to have compassion for the dad who has to pick up the mom's slack. The single fathers in recovery taught me that. Then I had other members who are women who also had to pay, child support. I was able to go to them for that. People who get clean and don't even get their kids back, because they're lost and caught up in a system. You know what I mean? And it's like I forgot what the question was.
Well, it's just asking about giving yourself, because I know we have a tendency to be so humble, right? Like, oh, it was only through God's will, right?
Right.
But you did some stuff along the way too that got you here,
right?
And a lot of times as addicts, we tend not to give. We seem to be a little harder on ourselves than the normal people, you know.
Yeah. Now that you say that though, I do have sometimes a hard time giving myself credit, right? But like I was saying, showing up. Right. Showing up is, even when I'm scared, right, or I have fear, like, oh man, what's gonna happen, or this and that. It's like, just to get through that fear and like show up for something is where God can do the rest of the work, right?
Right.
But you just got to be there.
You got to do the footwork. You got to show up.
Yes.
And then like another thing I wanted to ask you is like, when you were homeless back then, could you have ever imagined a life like this today?
No. It's been a very, like, I can just see a bunch of different things that have happened to get me to where I am now. And I'm like, dang, if God would have gave me like a preview, I would have been like, what? That can't happen. Like, that won't happen.
Right. Yeah. Cause like people like yourself, you are the mission statement for this podcast, right? To show people that you can start here and you can go here.
Right.
And then past that, it's limitless.
Right.
Right. And so like, what keeps you plugged into the 12-step process and recovery at this point in your life when things are going so good?
You know, just having a relationship with my sponsor and, you know, having a group of supportive women, which is, for me, it's my sponsorship family. They keep me plugged in. You know, they're the ones like checking on me when, like, that's why it's important to build relationships so people can like call you out on your shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of what keeps me plugged in, is that, you know, through the time I've accumulated here, I have people that care about me today, you know, and that will check me and, you know, ask me these uncomfortable questions, even if it pisses me off. You know, I can have a resentment for a little bit, but I'll get over it. You know, I'll be like, you know, shit is right, you know, and just wanting to keep what I have is what keeps me plugged in.
Yeah, because like my buddy Brad always says, it's hard to spot self-deception by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So we need a group, especially people like us that live with this disease.
Right.
And sometimes this voice can get pretty loud.
Yes.
Right. And so that's so important. Is there anything, like, before we wrap it up, is there anything that we didn't touch on or anything you want to say?
I mean, I could probably talk about my husband, who's clean too.
Yeah. Let's hear about your husband.
I was telling him the story too. Or maybe you, I met him at, you know, after I got a year clean. My parents told me if I had got a year clean, they would take me to the World Convention. And so they did, you know, because I made it to a year, and we went to Orlando, Florida, and I met my husband, and he was from Riverside, California, out there. And, you know, at that time I only had a year, and I think he had like 5 years clean. And I was like, dang, he probably won't date somebody with like, you know, like only a year clean. I don't really probably have much to offer, you know what I mean? But he was actually, you know, interested, and, you know, he didn't have like any kids and no baggage, and you know, it didn't seem like it, right? I was like, okay, he seems like, my sponsor told me to make a list prior to that. I had already made a list, and I was already in the process of becoming like the list I wanted to attract, right? She's like, okay, well, if that's the kind of man you want, you need to become that list, because the only way you're going to get a man like that is if you're that kind of person. So I did that. And, you know, I'm in the process of, you know, becoming this list. I meet this guy. So we just stayed in touch, though, because I wanted to be single for a whole year. And it was a couple months shy of that year. So I was like, okay, I need to just, he'll be my friend. Yeah, I was like, we'll just keep him there, you know, so I could just keep an eye on him. And then we made it like official. I had one more month to go, but we made it official like that month before I spent that whole year single. So, you know, we've been together ever since, you know, and he has his own recovery. I have mine. And, you know, when he met me, I was in that 1-bedroom apartment. And then after I was there for a year, I was able to go into this 2-bedroom house. So he moved up with me when I got that bigger place, you know, and we stayed there for like 3 years because of COVID. 2020 happened, and we had to kind of stay put there for a while because it was crazy trying to move.
Right. And
we just became homeowners this ended last year.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we would have never. We sit in our kitchen and we just like laugh sometimes. Like, dang, you know, like people want to, you know, our family wants us to be around them today, and we're really homeowners, you know, like two people like us, you know. So, and that's just like that's another place where I'm at too. You know, I've been in this place for the shop for 3 months, and then right after I got this shop, like 4 days later, we had just went out house hunting, right? Just so randomly that they accepted our offer, right? And we had been looking for a house for 2 years, and this place accepted the offer right after I moved into here. So I was like, dang, that is so crazy, you know. And so I got this place and a house, you know. God bless me with both of those things the end of last year. So, you know, and you know, coming from where we come from, it's like, dang, that is so crazy, you know.
Right.
It's just what can happen when you get clean. Like the opportunities are endless, you know, new possibilities keep rising. Right. So it's just, yeah, it's amazing.
See, that's awesome. From like homeless,
right,
losing kids, to getting the kids back, to business owner, happy relationship, homeowner, right? Yes. It just shows when you keep that recovery and higher power here, everything else just.
Yeah, it just happens without you know, and you know it's from God when it's not. You don't have to jump through a bunch of hurdles to get it. It just gets presented to you,
Right.
you know. Like the literature talks about that too. Like asking, you know, you ask God for stuff, He'll give it to you. But you have to now. We have to keep up the hard work to keep it.
Yeah.
We got to do the work to keep it now.
Be careful what you ask for, because
Yeah.
you might get it.
Yeah,
And
and
it
then
comes
you
with
gotta-
a whole new set of problems.
Yeah, you're like, damn, and bills, you know.
Right.
I'm like, we got 2 places to keep going. I'm like, so yeah, it's a lot. But you know what? We have the tools because of the program. You know, because of
Right.
the 12 steps, we get to apply them in these areas of our lives so that we can manage them and keep them.
And you have a group of people that's experienced every problem you're dealing with to lean on, right?
Exactly. There's a bunch of homeowners in you know, in the
Who would have thought
program,
it? A
so-
bunch of drug addicts, a bunch of homeowners?
Right.
Right?
And when I see them too, I'm like, gosh, that's what he's doing is amazing. You would have never thought, you know, you hear somebody talk about their story, you're like, damn, I would have never thought of that about them, you know?
Right.
So.
Perfect. And so, I know you got way more followers than we do, but do you want to like plug your business or anything on here?
I mean, yeah, you guys can, you know, you can follow me at Bree Jazz. It's Bree, BREE period JAZ on TikTok and on Instagram.
Awesome.
It looks just like that.
Boom, right
just
there.
Not the braids.
That's it.
But yeah, that's mine too.
Perfect. I think we got it. That's perfect. And we end it with a hug all the time.
Okay,
so
yeah.
you owe me a hug.
Of
We'll go
course.
this way so we don't knock everything over. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing this. Oh, wait, you're like 45 minutes, Jesse?